Thanks to everybody for gathering on fairly short notice. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been getting a lot of questions. To everybody for gathering on fairly short notice. I'm getting feedback. Are you getting that?
Yeah, if you could put yourself on mute, please, other than the Chief Justice. Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to call to order this emergency meeting of the Judicial Council of Georgia. Some housekeeping reminders. If you're a guest, if you'll email rsvp@georgiacourts.gov so we can have accurate minutes. The meeting is being recorded and live stream. It's open to the press and public. Please mute your devices if you're not speaking. If you're having any problems following things, you can email or contact Tracy Mason or Cheryl Coronas. I know Chief Judge Brian Rickman could not be here today, but Vice Chief Judge Mercier, I believe, is with us. And Chief Judge Brasher from the 4th Judicial Administrative District is being represented by Judge Robert McBurney. I want to recognize the Chief Superior Court judges who we've invited to join us today. Also, Grace McGowan, who's the new District Court Administrator for the 9th Judicial Administrative District, who effective this week. And Mike Engelking, who's the Emergency Management Accreditation Program Manager for GEMA, is also with us on the Zoom today. Ms. Clanton, do you have a roll call of Judicial Council members?
I do. I've got most people counted as present with the exception of the people that I'm going to read out now. And so if you are present, please let me know. Judge Walter Davis. Judge Jeffrey Kite.
Here.
Thank you. Judge Melanie Cross.
I'm here.
Judge Al Wong. Judge Vi Bennett.
I'm here. Go Dogs, go Stetson.
Chief Judge Price.
I'm here.
Thank you, Chief. Judge Render Hurd. Judge Sean Rhodes. Judge Quinn Casper.
I'm here.
Thank you, Judge. Chief Judge Rebecca Pitts.
Sorry, this is Judge Rhodes. I couldn't get my microphone off mute. I am here. I apologize.
Thank you, Judge. Again, Judge Rebecca Pitts. Chief, that completes the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Clanton. So we called this meeting because over the past couple of weeks, as the Omicron variant spread, we've been getting a lot of questions. Myself, AOC, Presiding Justice Boggs, Justice Agrua, and the COVID task force about guidance for what to do as we face this new wave. And we thought it would be a useful thing to try to get together. I'm going to spend a few minutes offering the guidance I think I can. Then Presiding Justice Boggs is going to give you an update on our ARPA funding status. And then we'll try to answer your questions to the extent we can. And we also want an opportunity to hear reports from your areas of the judicial system. At Judge Padgett's suggestion, we invited all the Chief Superior Court judges to join in on this Zoom because they have particular leadership roles both in the local management of the COVID outbreak as well as in our ARPA funding requests. So I want to make 2 points up front. The first one is that I know we are all sick and tired of dealing with COVID and frustrated that every time we seem to take a couple steps forward, something happens and we end up a step or two back. I heard someone say correctly that, this virus is called COVID-19, but we've been dealing with it in 2020 and 2021, and now we're in 2022, still dealing with COVID-19. My first Judicial Council meeting as Chief Justice was an emergency meeting we held last August 13th because the Delta wave was hitting. And we convened to talk about how to deal with that wave. And we got through that wave in the fall, but now we're facing a new wave, a different variant. I do want to keep in mind that whatever problems we think we have, all of you who know healthcare professionals know that they've been dealing with even more significant challenges in a much more direct way than any of us. And so, it's always good to have some comparison where you feel blessed rather than put upon. My second point up front is I want to again thank everybody for persevering through this. We're all public servants and we have to keep our judicial system operating as best we can for the people we serve. And that's always hard work, but it's been particularly hard work over the past 2 years. And I think all of our Judicial Council participants, but particularly those of you in the front lines, have been diligent and creative and compassionate and professional. And I want you to know how much that is appreciated. And we just need to keep it up till we get through all of this. We are in a new phase of the pandemic. The Omicron variant continues to spread much more rapidly and aggressively than any previous variant. Although fortunately, it also looks like it's not causing as much severe illness or death that requires hospitalization. But there are so many people who are getting infected that even though it's not causing as high a rate of serious illness, our hospitals are still filling up again. And that's one of the biggest concerns with all these variants. But it also appears that this is a wave, in part because of its aggressiveness. It's going to pass over more quickly than the past waves of COVID. And so we have to keep in mind that this is different than the other waves that we've dealt with. And so we don't want to just go back and apply the same tools that we've applied the last time this happened in the fall. I also want to remind everyone that the best protection remains to be vaccinated and, if possible, boosted. All 9 of the Supreme Court justices have been fully vaccinated and boosted, as is my entire family. And although there are still a lot of breakthrough cases, even if you're vaccinated and boosted, and I know of many, including Justice LaGrua and one of my brothers recently, the reality is that being vaccinated and particularly boosted is the best protection against infection, against transmission to other people, and most importantly, against serious symptoms requiring hospitalization or causing a risk to your life. So I hope that all of you are fully vaccinated, boosted when possible, and I hope you're encouraging everyone around you to also be vaccinated and boosted. Public health guidance also continues to strongly recommend that we focus on improving ventilation in public indoor spaces and using social distancing and mask wearing, as all of those protect everyone involved, both from getting infected and, if they are infected, from transmitting this virus to others. I hope you are familiar with the new guidance that's come out in the last week and a half from CDC and then from our Department of Public Health, DPH. Another thing that mask wearing does is there is a more quick timeline for people to get out of isolation if they're infected, or quarantine if they are exposed to someone who's infected. But a lot of that requires wearing masks once a person has tested negative or gone a sufficient number of days if they want to resume contact with others, which is very important if you have people who are in the court system who need to return to work for our system to work effectively. Another point I want to focus on is, if we are going to have people wear masks, they need to wear masks that actually protect them and other people, which means wearing masks that cover their noses and mouths. It is remarkable, the number of people you see wearing masks that protect their chins, which neither protects them nor anyone else. And also the guidance currently is that we should try as much as possible to use masks that are effective against COVID and particularly Omicron. And that's an N95 or KN95 mask or a surgical mask with a cloth mask worn over it to make sure it's fitted properly. Those masks were in short supply 2 years ago. They are widely available now. They are strongly recommended. And so you really want to encourage people to try to use those more effective masks rather than masks that may look like masks but really aren't that effective. I hope you will keep up with the guidance that CDC and DPH put out. It's widely available on their website, but I also hope that you are consulting with your local public health experts to make sure you understand the situation in your community and particularly in your local hospitals and their situation, because a lot of what we're doing is designed, as it has been from the beginning, to make sure our hospitals don't get overwhelmed with COVID patients. As Chief Justice Milton and I have said many times over the past 2 years, we have two goals in these efforts. One goal is to keep our court system in Georgia opening and functioning, and the other is to make sure that the people who work in our courthouses and the people who are required to come to our courthouses are safe. We have to keep in mind, and this should be a part of our talking points whenever we're talking to staff and to the outside world, that most of the people who come to our courthouses are required to do so. They don't have the ability that they have with most businesses and with most government agencies to decide what level of risk they want to take for themselves and the people they love. If they are required to come to court to work, or if they're required to come to court to be a litigant or a witness or a juror. And so we have to be particularly cautious about what we're doing for people that we are requiring to be in our courthouse settings. But we also need to make sure that we're learning over time and not being overly protective in terms of the proceedings that we are deciding to hold or not to hold. Remote proceedings, which we all are very accustomed to now, continue to be the safest way to do things when they can be done legally and effectively and pretty efficiently. And so I hope you're continuing to use those proceedings when you can as an option. But we also recognize that a lot of evidentiary proceedings, some other proceedings, and particularly jury trials, don't work well or can't lawfully be done remotely. We know how to conduct most of those proceedings, even when COVID is out there. We have seen that you can do even high-profile multi-week jury trials safely, as long as the rate in your local community is not spiking, as it unfortunately is now. But we don't want to stop doing everything. And this is my main theme. We don't want to stop doing everything when we don't need to stop doing everything. And we don't want to stop doing things longer than we need to protect people against COVID. So where does this leave us? The Omicron wave we're in now looks like it's going to be the highest COVID wave we've had, but it also looks like it's going to be the shortest COVID wave we've had. A lot of predictions are we will be to the peak of it within as early as a couple weeks, and we may be pretty far on the declining side of it within, again, a matter of weeks, not months. So unless the situation worsens dramatically and there are other statewide restrictions, I don't anticipate issuing another statewide judicial emergency order or any other kind of formal statewide guidance. This remains a situation that's best evaluated and managed at the local level. And I want to talk a little bit about what you can think about locally. The first thing is we've had a lot of questions about local judicial emergency orders. And I'll talk about those orders, but I want to emphasize, as we have before, that the statutory judicial emergency orders are pretty powerful tools, but only on a couple fronts. The only thing you can do with a statutory judicial emergency order is toll or suspend legal filing deadlines and designate an alternative court facility. Only the Chief Justice and the Chief Superior Court judges can issue statutory judicial emergency orders. So in the current environment, you may need a judicial emergency order, but what we're seeing is it will likely be when there's an outbreak in a courthouse or in a particular office in a courthouse. And that requires restricting access to that particular area and maybe identifying an alternate location for that particular office or court. And possibly if there's difficulty getting things filed or moving proceedings along, tolling for that particular court. But those orders, local judicial emergency orders, are limited to 30 days at a time and a maximum of 90 days. Those orders do not necessarily need to be even 30 days at the outset, and it's unlikely that they need to be for an entire judicial circuit or even an entire county, because the proceedings that you are unable to handle are likely to be more targeted. I'll give you an example, a good example. There was a recent local judicial emergency order declared on December 29th for the Ware County Magistrate Court, because a couple judges in that court and some staff members were either infected or exposed. That order was issued by not the chief magistrate judge, because the chief magistrate judge doesn't have authority to enter a statutory emergency order. The chief magistrate judge went to Chief Superior Court Judge Dwayne Gillis. He entered an order. It applies only to the magistrate court. The initial order is for a period of only 15 days. It obviously could be extended if needed, but the hope is the people who were exposed or infected will get through isolation and quarantine within a couple of weeks, which is what the guidance is now. And very importantly, it also explained how filings can continue to be made and how important proceedings like bond hearings can continue to happen using a Dropbox out front, emergency contact numbers, and scheduled appointments on an as-needed basis. And that's a point I really want to reiterate for anyone considering a local judicial emergency order, because we've seen this issue a lot when people hastily issue an order when there's an outbreak. You do not want to close your court. You do not want to say the public has no ability to access my court. You may need to designate an alternate facility or arrange some way for people to file things. It can be an emergency contact number. It can be a Dropbox. It can be another office in the courthouse or another building that people can come to. And you also want to make sure that there's some provision that if an essential proceeding needs to happen, that there's a way for the public and lawyers and litigants to let you know and for you to be able to respond to it and do it if necessary. So please, you don't have to reinvent the wheel if you do need a local judicial emergency order. The statewide judicial emergency orders and lots of local judicial emergency orders are posted on the AOC website. That's georgiacourts.gov. You go to the website, on the first page is a bunch of listings of COVID information, and there's a listing of all the judicial emergency orders, and you can find good examples for the situation you're in. Or you can ask me or the presiding justice, Justice Agrua, AOC, and we can point you to good orders that you can use as a model. I will ask again, though, if you're a Chief Superior Court judge and you're going to enter a local judicial emergency order, pull up the statute. It's 36. 36,360 and what follows, and make sure that you are complying with the statutory requirements if you're issuing a local judicial emergency order. So I've talked about judicial emergency orders, but as I said at the front, they're only really useful for a couple things: tolling and alternate facilities. What is much more important in managing this COVID situation is the authority of judges generally to issue orders controlling your court operations and court management, including who has access to your courthouses and courtrooms, what proceedings will be held remotely and how those proceedings will be held remotely, public health precautions if you're going to have in-person proceedings like mask requirements or social distancing, and most importantly for the current setting, scheduling issues. So if you need to toll proceedings because people just can't get to court, you can do that through an emergency order. But if you have a jury trial scheduled and all you really need to do is wait for 3 weeks until this wave looks like it may pass, you don't necessarily need to toll all the deadlines. You can do what you often do as judges, which is continue a proceeding for a few weeks, and not continue it for 6 months potentially, but continue it for a few weeks. A good example of that was the order that Chief Judge Leonard and Chief Judge Bowers issued this week for the Cobb County Superior and State Courts. They realized that even though we really want jury trials to get rolling again, it is very difficult in a lot of places to conduct a jury trial unless you have extraordinary spacing and other protocols. There are so many people who may be affected, and again, you're requiring them to be there. And so they put a hold on the jury trials that were scheduled for the first couple weeks of January, but they didn't hold them for 30 days. They said they were going to put a hold on for 3 weeks. And so that's the kind of thing, if you're thinking about how to manage jury trials right now, you may want to consider. You need to make sure you're thinking about your authority in terms of the Constitution and speedy trial deadlines and so forth, which may require tolling. But a lot of times you'll just be able to control your calendars in the way you often control your calendars. Again, there's lots of guidance and examples on dealing with this situation in the appendices to the statewide judicial emergency orders, and a lot of materials that the Judicial COVID Task Force has put together. All of those are on the AOC website. The COVID Task Force is continuing to meet. Their next meeting is next Wednesday, and they are often a good authority for some guidance or questions. But we want to be monitoring this on an ongoing basis. So you also don't want to set a new policy for the next 3 months or 6 months. We may be through this wave again in 2 or 3 weeks and looking at a different situation coming. So, for example, my court yesterday met. We have an oral argument session scheduled January 18th to 20th, and we decided that because we can do oral arguments remotely fairly well, even though we'd prefer to be in person, we're going to do that session in 2 weeks remotely. But we are planning and expecting to do our February oral argument session live and in person. We are going to meet on January 29th and make the decision for February in 3 weeks. But we are not postponing things indefinitely or saying we're going to make a change that's indefinite. One last point I just want to emphasize for anything you're doing in person. I hope you are communicating and will continue to communicate with the people you are requiring to come to court about what you're doing to protect them. And I hope you're doing it loudly and often. I know many of you are sending out notices to potential jurors and litigants and witnesses with your COVID protocols. You need to make sure that if you're changing those protocols or adjusting them, that you're updating your notices. I hope you're posting them on your court websites and at your entrance door to the courthouses. And I also hope that when you start a proceeding, particularly one involving jurors or potential jurors, you're reminding them of the protocols. It's really important, if we're going to make sure that our citizens are continuing to show up for jury service and for proceedings, that we let them know what we're doing to try to keep them safe. So that is my kind of overview of what we've gathered from our discussions with many of you and with the COVID task force folks and internally. I want to end where I started by just saying I understand the frustration and the weariness, but I appreciate your perseverance in getting through this, and hopefully this wave is going to pass fairly quickly. I want to turn it over to Presiding Justice Boggs to see if I've missed anything or emphasized anything. Then he's going to give you an update on where we are with our ARPA funding, and then we'll open it up to questions, and then we'll kind of go down the list of Judicial Council members to get your reports. PJ?
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that outline, and I know the Judicial Council members do as well. I simply want to reiterate a couple of points that the Chief made that bear repeating. First and most importantly, thank you. You all have been remarkably adaptive to the challenges of COVID, and I want you to know that we notice that. We appreciate that. The phone calls that we get asking for guidance are very warmly received and appreciated. And I would ask that you share what you are doing and how you are adapting your particular circuits, because what you're doing may be very helpful to someone else who has not thought about that sort. So please share with us, informally, if you will, formally, if you like, what you're doing. And then really think judiciously about how you want to use your emergency order power, statutory powers. They don't have to be in 30-day increments, as we've already demonstrated. They can be much less than that. And so just use the statutory emergency order proceedings very carefully. We don't know what the future holds, and you certainly don't have to do those in 30-day increments. So with that, I want to reiterate, not only on behalf of the Chief, but on behalf of our entire court, and I'm sure the Court of Appeals, how much we all appreciate and how much we have noticed what you all have done to be so adaptive over the last 2 years to these really insurmountable challenges that none of us were really prepared for. So thank you for that. And with that, we will take questions at the end, but I'd like to give you a brief update on the American Rescue Plan Act funding. First, I want to personally thank your Superior Court Judge Council President Wade Padgett and all the DCAs who have been really integrally involved in helping us in this process. I want to particularly also thank the chief judges, Superior Court judges for each of the circuits for the work you've done in coordinating and really prioritizing your grant needs in your particular circuits. So as most of you know, the ARPA Grant Committee met on December 20th, and we awarded roughly $24.8 million in grant funding to 26 judicial circuits who applied during the November 21 application period. Those would be for calendar year 22 expenses, and we're now in the process of making sure all of that is buttoned up and ready to go, so that when we get application reimbursement request in February for January expenses, we'll be good to go. We had 28 applicants. We awarded 26. One application was withheld or withdrawn and will be resubmitted for the current period that we're in. And another was simply held over to for the current period to be reconsidered to get some questions answered that were still outstanding. The AOC ARPA fiscal team is still working closely with the circuits on the implementation of the funding and the reimbursement process. I encourage you all to let whoever is heading this up for your respective circuits let us know if there are any challenges, and we'll do our best to work with you to make sure that the reimbursement process works very well. You should also know just a couple of things that the committee did that you may not be aware of. So in planning for what originally started out as a 3-year grant process, the committee voted to allocate a target amount of 50% of the total. So we got 110 million, but 14 million went over to the circuit public defenders. So we have $96 million, and the committee decided to allocate 50% of that, which is $48 million in funding in year one. So that would be for calendar year 22 that we're in now. And of that 50%, 66% of that in cycle one, and the balance in cycle in the remaining cycles for this year. So we still have plenty of resources remaining. No one will be prejudiced for not having applied in that first cycle. And of course, we have a current application cycle ongoing right now, which expires on the 15th of this month. We also decided, the committee, to eliminate the fourth cycle period which was scheduled for August of 22. As you all know, those cycles were for calendar year 22 expenses. So if you had applied in the August cycle and you got approved, you would have only had a couple of months left to expend those resources. The committee thought it better to use that as a move that date and eliminate it and move another date earlier so that we have the application period for 2023 earlier than December, so that we and you can all prepare without the pressing need of the holiday, and give you also a little more ramp up time for your 1/1/23 award period. So we did stratify and decide how we were going to designate funding. The committee also eliminated the last period and instead moved up the final period, which will be the application period at the end of this year for calendar year 23. As I stated, we are currently accepting applications for funding through January 15th. So that is for awards that would be effective on March the 1st. My committee is going to meet again on February 18th to consider those applications and make award decisions. You should also know that we are continually, as we've told you, updating the grant documents. And so those grant documents, including an updated application, an updated overview and instructions sheet, as well as budget forms and FAQs, have been posted to the ARPA website. And I encourage you all that are applying in the current period and in subsequent periods to use the most current versions of those documents, which will be the ones that are posted on the website. You should know that we also imposed a cap of $2 million on the applications. Of the 28 applications we got, I believe only 7 exceeded $2 million. But obviously we had no idea when we started this process what the needs of the circuits were going to be, nor what the requests were going to be. So once we got that first round, we decided that a cap of $2 million per circuit would be appropriate to ensure that we had sufficient funds for the 3-year award periods. And so we did cap at $2 million. The bulk of the requests, however, were below $2 million and ranged from literally $13,280 for one grant award all the way up to the max of $2 million. So thank you all for your patience as you worked with us through that process. Please know that the chief and I and the AOC ARPA fiscal team continue to meet with OPB to clear up issues that remain outstanding about eligible uses of these funds. We will provide that information or any updates we have for you as soon as possible. But I want to publicly thank Cynthia Clanton and her team at the AOC that have been working diligently to get this grant program off the ground and to make sure that it works seamlessly so that when you start submitting reimbursement requests for this first round next month, that those reimbursement requests will be forthcoming in short order. We all have the same desire, and that is to help you move those cases, prioritizing serious violent felonies. And we're open to answer questions and help you along the way. So, Chief, that's all I have on the ARPA update. I'll turn it back to you if you want to take questions.
Thanks, PJ. And I just want to add one other point on ARPA, which is part of the ARPA application asked those applying to describe what monies they've asked for, ARPA type money they've asked for from their counties. And some of you have done that. We've also heard that many of you have done that, and the counties have been resistant or reluctant to provide any money to the courts. Your counties are all about to receive their second-year tranche of ARPA money, which in some cases is, well, in most cases is quite a bit of money. In some cases, individual counties are getting more than the $96 million that we have to dedicate for 159 counties backlog of cases. So $96 million sounded like a lot at the beginning, but we're learning that when you divide it up around the state, it ends up not being that much. As Presiding Justice Boggs said, there's a cap. We're trying to front load the money more and allocate more of it up front, because obviously if we can clear more of the backlogs early, that'll be good. But you're going to need to ask your counties for some of their resources if you have a problem in your courts. Your courts are important parts of the county governments. The counties and the state pay for courts jointly. The counties have a lot of money, and the public safety and other issues that are caused in part by court backlogs are a county problem as well as a state problem. And so I just want to highlight that, because you're probably going to hear more about the need to do that, particularly as we move forward past this initial round of grants. And the presiding justice and I met with ACCG this week to talk about this. They're very open and understanding of the issue. And I think they'll be communicating with county leadership, but I think that's an important point. PJ, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And yes, we've met with them formally this week, but I've also been talking to them. They have a representative on our committee, on the advisory committee. The interesting thing is that the county money is not only much more significant in volume, but it's also less restrictive than the money we have from the governor's office and OPB. And also, you should know that the Treasury regulations that have been promulgated by the Department of Treasury include that case backlogs are identified as constituting a negative economic impact sufficient to be eligible for reimbursement or expenses from those funds. And lastly, I would say that counties are getting this money directly. It doesn't come straight through the states. So there's no requirement that the county governments have to get pre-clearance on any of that through OPB. Obviously, counties want to spend that money in the way they think is most appropriate. And we just simply want to ensure that you all know that they can spend the money on court systems, that case backlogs are identified specifically in the Treasury regs as constituting a negative economic impact, and so are eligible uses for courts. And that we'll continue to meet with ACCG and others to try to encourage them to co-partner with us and the governor's office on our ARPA funds, because honestly, they can spend their money in ways that we can't spend our money to help the court systems. Permanent infrastructure would be one example where we hope that the circuits will all be able to partner with the counties and leverage the money we have on the OPB side with the money that they have on the county side. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, Chief, to remind them of our advocacy on their behalf.
All right. Actually, before we open up questions, why don't we go through the members and get reports, because that may lead to some other questions potentially, and then we'll have questions. So let me start with the Court of Appeals, Vice Chief Judge Mercier.
We don't have anything new to report today, other than that we will continue to work very closely with the Supreme Court to make determinations about safety protocols in the building, as well with oral arguments. We continue to monitor those conditions, frankly, daily, and make decisions based on the available information that we have in conjunction with the Supreme Court and CDC guidelines, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you. I don't think we have Walt Davis from the Business Court on.
I'm here,
I think he joined us.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm
Judge
here.
Davis.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. We have pushed all of our hearings in January to virtual, and hope to follow your lead and be back in person in February. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Judge Padgett for the Council of Superior Court Judges.
Chief, again, trying to be brief. We are meeting shortly after this meeting is concluded virtually to decide about our winter conference, or that is normally the same week as MLK Day. And we are going to make a decision this afternoon as to whether that can continue or whether it will be virtual or some other hybrid of the two. Other than that, I know a lot of our judges are struggling with exactly how to move forward with jury trials, which may be as intimate a personal setting as we need to do as a court system, and how to work on the backlog when you can't have jury trials. And so I think everybody is fighting that fight on their own. As you can probably tell from my voice, I might be one of the, I don't know what I've got, but I've got something. And so, but just finished a jury trial. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over. That we don't have anything else that we really need to report at this time.
And we realize, as always, jury trials are the hardest thing we're dealing with. And we do have a backlog, and that's the biggest issue. But, again, it may be that we need to postpone them, but not for 3 months or 2 months, maybe just for a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, and then reevaluate. Although I'll say, I think we have an appreciation, but not as hands-on a view of just how complicated logistically that can be for you in the trial courts. Judge Wong, the Council of State Court Judges.
Chief, we don't have anything new to report. I think we're trying to work through all this like everybody else, as you have outlined. And jury trial aside, these in-person proceedings gets a little problematic. So we're trying to work through that and be safe as possible.
Thank you, Judge Wong. Judge Price, Chief Judge Price, the Council of Juvenile Court Judges.
Thank you, Chief. The only thing we have to report is that based on some significant upcoming legislations, our council voted at our last business meeting to retain the service of a legislative representative, Rusty Sewell, who will be hopefully meeting with the legislators to suggest the positions that our class of court would like to see.
Thank you, Judge Price. The Council of Probate Court Judges, Judge Lakes.
Thank you, Chief. I don't think our council really has anything additional to report on top of what everyone else has already stated about the pandemic and preparations, but appreciate everyone's leadership and guidance. Thank you.
Thank you. I know the probate courts have had some of the hardest issues with COVID, given your direct contact with a lot of citizens on a lot of things. So appreciate your working through those issues. Judge Casper, the Council of Magistrate Court Judges.
Thank you, Chief. Like everybody else, we don't have a lot more to report other than what's already been discussed, but I can tell you that the example that you discussed from Ware County is happening in multiple other places for magistrate courts. So we're trying to work with our judges in those counties to get out emergency orders through the Superior Court that are restrictive enough to just deal with the immediate quarantine period, because we are seeing a lot of magistrate courts, staff, and judges that are all getting it at the same time. So we're working through that as we can.
Thank you, Judge Casper. And it reminds me that if you do issue emergency orders and follow the statute, you need to provide notice to the Chief Justice, and also it's good to provide it to AOC. That lets us monitor where things are happening, and it lets us get them on the website so they're good current orders on there for other people to look at. Judge Duff, the Council of Municipal Court Judges.
Thank you. We have no report.
Okay, thank you, Judge Duff. I don't know if President Veit is on from the State Bar.
I am, Chief. Just like everyone else, we are in the midst of our mid-year meeting for the State Bar of Georgia that I had to switch from a hybrid to fully virtual for these exact reasons. Although we aren't compelling people to attend these meetings, we're just cognizant of it and wanted to be smart, especially after the holidays.
Thank you. I think that was a good decision, although I know you wanted to get everybody together. Ms. Clinton from AOC.
Thank you, Chief. Yes, the AOC remains fully functional and staff are in the office on a rotating basis. Please let us know how we can support you. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor Jones from the Council of Accountability Court Judges.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice. We don't have anything significant to report other than accountability courts continue to serve participants, whether that's in person, virtually, or in a hybrid fashion. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson from the Commission on Dispute Resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chief Justice. We do not have anything to report other than our mediations are happening virtually. And if anyone needs any assistance with that, feel free to reach out.
Thank you. I think I saw Mr. Holloman from the Council of Superior Court Clerks.
Yes, Chief. I want to emphasize that clerks over the last 2 years have already followed your advice to take more moderate steps. At the beginning, there were a lot of, quote, offices closed as a frontline contact with the public. But I've noticed over the last 2 years, they've been much more adept at doing exactly what you're proposing today, taking smaller steps, and also, very importantly, communicating to the public, particularly the real estate industry, and letting them know there are alternatives to coming into the office and taking care of their business. So we continue to do that, and I will reinforce that idea based on your comments today after this meeting.
I appreciate that, Mr. Holloman. And the Superior Court clerks are independent offices. The coordination with the Chief Superior Court judges, is really a useful thing. And a lot of times it is only the clerk's office that has a problem, not the courthouse generally or the court. And so figuring out how to keep a functioning aspect of the clerk's office can mean that the court can keep functioning in other respects. Ms. Greer, the Commission on Professionalism.
Good afternoon, Chief. I don't have anything new to report today.
Thank you. Mr. Weeks, the Council of Court Administrators.
Chief Justice, we have nothing to report today. Thank you.
Mr. Ashworth from ICJE.
Chief Justice, I have nothing to report for this emergency session. Thank you, sir.
I know y'all are balancing what's live and what's remote and what's hybrid, and appreciate those efforts and your flexibility. You may get a call, I think, from Judge Padgett today, it sounds like. Mr. Boring from the JQC.
Good afternoon, Chief. I'm reporting for Mr. Boring. We don't have anything to report at this time. Thank you.
All right. So we have a few minutes. We'll open it up to questions. I also just want to reiterate, if you have questions or concerns, feel free to pick up the phone or send me or the presiding justice or Justice LaGrua or the folks at AOC, contact us, let us know what the issue is. We can't always help, but at least if we can help, we know there's an issue that needs help, and hopefully we can evaluate that going forward. But do we have questions either on the ARPA side or the COVID side at this point? It's always hard to get questions when we have 100 people on a Zoom, but okay, well, you probably have, Judge Mara.
I have the question.
Okay, well, if you do have questions, again, feel free to contact us, and we'll try to sort them out or give you some guidance to the extent we can. I appreciate your quickly being able to attend this Zoom meeting, and we're trying not to go back to another change. We're trying not to have a bi-weekly emergency Judicial Council meeting because we really shouldn't need that. We're hopefully this will be the meeting for the Omicron surge, and we'll be on to better things in a few weeks. But we will have emergency meetings if we need them. I think our next scheduled meeting is February 11th. It was scheduled to be by Zoom in any event. And so we will plan on meeting by Zoom on February 11th. Hopefully we will be back and able to meet in the Nathan Deal Judicial Building on April 22nd in person. Give you a chance, many of you, the first chance to see our beautiful new home. The last point I just want to make that popped up as we were talking is there are a lot of rules for your classes of court, the bar, different commissions and committees that were amended on an emergency basis at the start of the pandemic. Many of those have been kind of continued over, but are set to expire at some point in March or in the middle of this year. And I know your rules committees are looking at them to evaluate whether they should be made permanent or they can be eliminated or they need to be amended. But I hope you are paying attention to that, because some of those deadlines are coming up in the near future, and we want to make sure that we have the right rules in place on a longer term basis. So with that, I'm going to say our meeting is over. Thank you again for everything you're doing in general, but particularly dealing with the COVID crisis, and many of you with getting ARPA funds and clearing out backlogs. And I hope you have a great weekend, and we should end where somebody started. Go Dogs. Hopefully Monday we will have a good event for our state and be able to say lots of unpleasant things to our neighbors to the west. So we will hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe and healthy.
Thank you, everybody.